This episode of the Flush Podcast is brought to you by Walton's, Aluma Trailers, North Dakota Tourism, Federal Ammunition, OnX Hunt, and by Nutrisource Pet Foods. Today, we're going to take an in-depth look at America's 2022 quail hunting forecast. My guests are Chad Love and Andy Edwards from Quail Forever. They'll explain where hunters can expect to see big coveys of quail and places that the drought may have hurt numbers heading into this season. Stick around. All right, here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Flush Podcast. I'm Travis Frank. I'm your host. Brandon Morton, as always, is our producer. And thanks to the power of technology, we are all in different parts of the country right now, Brandon included, and yet we're recording a conversation as if we were sitting in the room together. Depending on where you're hunting or what social media channels you are following, this feels like the year of the pheasant. I mean, my goodness, the reports have been extraordinary during the first few weeks of the year. I genuinely hope that you've been able to get out there and enjoy the rush of the pheasant flush. I've heard from many, many hunters this year. Some of them saying they've never seen this many pheasants. Some of them saying they haven't seen this many pheasants in 20 years. Limits for 10 plus people on public lands in places like Minnesota and Iowa. Their season just opened. I was in North Dakota last week. I hope you enjoyed that conversation that I had with Tyler. The hunt was extraordinary. It's eye-opening to go out on the prairie in North Dakota, see the migration of ducks and waterfowl that are coming down. And then as you're driving down the road, every field you look at has pheasants. There were times where, I'm not exaggerating, I feel like I could have scooped up my limit of roosters just driving gravel roads. There were that many of them. We had to stop for roosters crossings all the time on the road. It was a beautiful sight, and it was a sight that I long for. It's a sight that I feel like most hunters dream about, and I'm driving east back into my home state of Minnesota, and there are pheasants to be had in Minnesota, but it didn't look nearly the same when I got home, and it was kind of depressing a little bit, wishing I had that. Anyway, I guess I'm rambling at this point, but I can't stress that the birds are out there this year, and it's been a great start to the hunting season. The reports from the Dakotas, Montana, Iowa, Minnesota for pheasant hunting has been solid. Today, we're going to get into the quail hunting forecast, which is an exciting season that's going to start kicking off around the country. My guests today are from Quail Forever, Andy Edwards and Chad Love. But before I bring them on to help us dissect the quail forecast, I have a story that came in last night from a listener. And if you've listened to this podcast for a while, this story might make you laugh a little bit like it made me laugh. It is from Rick Taxala. I apologize, Rick, if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Taxala. Anyway, Rick sent me this message. Good morning. I just wanted to share a quick story that happened last week. I live outside of Milwaukee. I have a 1.5-year-old wire-haired pointing Griffon. I let him out at 9-ish. 99% of the time he stays in the yard. That night, I called for him and he was gone. I went in the house to get my keys to start driving when a car stopped in front of my house and said, "Are you looking for your dog?" She said, "I just took him to the police station." She said he had no tags. In quotes, Rick says, "He did." I said, "Thanks. Where did you find him?" She said, "Right there. Right here." She said she stopped and he came up to the curb by her. Mind you, she was parked right in front of my house. I immediately thought of your story. I picked him up and he was running around the dispatch. Truly love your show and podcasts. Anyway, Rick is referring to the story of when somebody came and took my dog out of my yard. So apparently it's not so random because other people do that as well. I've heard from many listeners that have had a similar story, but I never understand why, if there's a dog in a yard, somebody picks that dog up and thinks that they need to take it in, drop it off, do something, knock on the door. If you think that it might be that, a stray dog, at least check the yard. that you took the dog out of. Anyway, thanks for sharing, Rick. Andy and Chad, do you have any dog stories similar to that where somebody has stolen your dogs?
All I can think of is that shows the cultural difference from the Midwest to the South. In the South, they pull up in your yard and drop dogs off. They don't. They don't try to get your dog and take it somewhere. So, no. Speaking from a household where we have one hunting dog and five adopted strays, no, we don't have that problem here.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really had that problem either of someone taking a dog out of my yard. Where I have had problems, and this is probably a universal with a lot of bird hunters, is I've had many people comment on the physical appearance and alleged, poor condition of my dogs,
Oh yeah.
specifically that they're too skinny. I
Mhm.
don't know how many conversations I've had with people who are just very concerned that my dogs apparently don't look like a furry egg roll. And they just don't really understand, that my dogs are working dogs and that they run a lot. And this is, they're in good shape. They're not too skinny. I do feed them. So that's really where I run into the most, static with people on my dogs.
Does it make
Yeah.
you then want to say, I hate to say this, but your dog is actually a little bit overweight?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't want to have someone punch me in the nose for insulting their dog. But like a lot of the time, people are commenting on the poor physical condition of my dog. I'm looking at theirs and I'm thinking, hey,
Yeah.
maybe they should hit the dog park a little more often, or something like that. Because generally speaking, the people who say that their dogs range from mildly overweight to morbidly obese.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, Andy Edwards, Quail Forever program manager, Chad Love, Quail Forever journal editor, are the guests on today's episode. Chad, let's start with you. Where have you been hunting this year? I know quail season hasn't kicked off yet, but I know that you're a passionate bird hunter and that you've been out in the field.
Yeah, so September is usually my prairie grouse season. So I kicked off the season in New Mexico hunting dusky grouse for the first time, which I had an absolute blast. It put me completely out of my frame of reference and my comfort zone because I'm a prairie guy. I hunt the plains for the most part, and I typically hunt the prairie grouse opener in Nebraska every year. But the past few years, it's been super hot, and I just wanted to try something different. So I went to New Mexico. Ran my dogs in the timber and, up at 10,000 feet and had a blast. Just absolutely fell in love with that topography and the terrain and that bird. And so really had fun doing that. And then a couple weeks after that, I switched to prairie grouse and started going to Nebraska. So I took 3 trips to the Nebraska sandhills this year and hunting sharptails and prairie chickens. And then I just got back last night, actually, from the Nebraska pheasant and quail opener. And of course, I'm a quail hunter primarily, so I was concentrating on quail. But I went up there this weekend and hunted and had a good time. I only live about 4 hours away from southern Nebraska, so I can leave the house at like 3 a.m. and be hunting by 8. So did that and had a real good time. Found a few birds, a little bit tougher than I thought it was going to be, but still managed to have a good time.
Nice. Andy, I know you got a few thorns stuck in your eye up in the Northwoods. Where have you been hunting?
Yeah, man. Went to the UP a couple weeks ago. We kind of came in on the heels of a snowstorm. Actually, got in just before the snow hit, and but hunted first couple of days in some pretty deep snow for grouse, and they sat up in the trees and laughed at us, and we then were able to find a spot that didn't have as much snow cover, got into birds, and then the snow melted. So we later in the week found both woodcock and grouse, and so had a great time there. And then actually, so most of our seasons aren't in the southeast yet as far as birds. They come in this coming weekend for a lot of states, but I'm gonna do a shout out here. Our youth deer season was this past weekend. And my 12-year-old Drew was able to get his first deer, a nice 9 points. So we were pretty ecstatic about that, and I've had a good weekend working up that deer, and dreams of taxidermy mounts ensue. So that's kind of been my season so far.
Oh, that's awesome. I got to take my nephew out on his first deer hunt. We have a youth season in Minnesota, and that was 2 weeks ago now. And my nephew, sitting right next to him, and then my 8-year-old and 6-year-old boys were sitting in the blind with us, and he took his first year, and it was just one of those experiences that I'm positive he'll never forget,
Oh
but
yeah.
I won't either. I mean, it was just sharing that with them. I have been absolutely in love with bringing the kids out into the field with me hunting the last couple of years, and it just keeps elevating. But congrats to you and your son
Yeah.
on the trophy of a lifetime. Hopefully, he has
Oh
many,
yeah.
many more. Andy,
Absolutely.
you're in what? Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, as far I was gonna say, I can't lie that I was really glad it was not a button buck and it was a 9 point because we were probably gonna mount whatever it was, and so this actually worked out. Like it was really great. But you
Uh,
were gonna say where I'm in Tennessee. I'm
yep.
about an hour south of Nashville. So
Okay. And Chad, where are you at?
I am in Woodward, Oklahoma. I was born and raised in Norman, but moved up to Woodward, which is in the northwest part of the state after school, which is kind of the epicenter of quail hunting in Oklahoma. So I've been here for about 25 years now.
And have quail always been your love when it comes to upland bird hunting?
Yeah. I mean, when you grow up in Oklahoma, especially you grow up in Oklahoma in the 70s and 80s during sort of the heyday of Oklahoma quail hunting, that's kind of, your thing. And even though I used to be an ardent, 3-season deer hunter, used to be a very hardcore waterfowl hunter, had chessies. I've had chessies since college. But quail have always been sort of my cornerstone. It's just something I've always done. I started hunting them when I was a kid without a dog, just, kicking up fence rows and have kind of progressed since then.
I feel like, there's a lot of pheasant hunters listening to this podcast, and some of them have quail hunted, some of them probably have not. Um, if you've never done it, I mean, like the explosion of a covey of quail, like there's something special about a big old gaudy pheasant exploding out of the grass. But when you have, these bumblebees that just explode and they go in every direction, like it only takes one covey rise to hook you. And I encourage somebody to go this year if they're on the fence, should I, shouldn't I? There are places you can hunt pheasants and quail in the same areas. We'll kind of do a broad scope look across the country here on today's episode. But what is it about the quail, Chad, that separates that bird from any other game bird, in your opinion?
I mean, of course, you start getting into the personal with that because it was such a big part of my childhood. Um, but for me, it is. I didn't grow up in a pheasant hunting culture, so for me, quail were sort of the bird that I was introduced to when it comes to the uplands. It was the only bird that I could hunt. And so, that's really what separates it for me. And also the fact that it can be a little bit more of a solitary activity. I tend to be a little bit more of a solitary hunter. Just myself and a dog or two. And pheasant hunting is a little bit more. At least, I mean, in the southeast, I think quail hunting culture is a lot more social. But for me, growing up, it was just more of an individual sort of pastime, and I think pheasant hunting is probably a little bit more social like that. Like for example, this weekend when I was up in Nebraska, Nebraska is one of those states where you often and actually a lot of times will find quail and pheasants on the same hunt, and so it gives me a really unique opportunity to interact with pheasant hunters in a sense that I don't typically do. And it's interesting. A lot of them had and I'm a gregarious hunter when I'm out in the field. And so, like, I'll stop and talk to people. And a lot of them were surprised that I was quail hunting, on opening weekend of the pheasant and quail opener. And I could tell some of them sort of had a curiosity about it. But it's just like, I'm surprised by the number of pheasant hunters who live in pheasant states who don't actively quail hunt. They should give it a try sometime because it can be very addictive.
Well, I find that interesting. Well, I mean, I think of them like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I love the quail explosion so much that I would probably be doing what you're doing, Chad, and chasing specifically for quail. Um, when you say that you're hunting for quail, not pheasants, explain how you're approaching that in Nebraska, where somebody would say, "Why are you hunting over there and not for pheasants?"
Yeah. So, in when you're specifically targeting pheasants, I mean, a quail is not a pheasant. They are very different birds. They have different habitat requirements. And Andy could speak much better to this than I can. But when I'm looking for quail in a place like Nebraska, I'm looking for uh, I'm not going to be hunting stubble fields. I'm not going to be hunting standing corn. I mean, you can find quail in those areas sometimes out feeding, but they're going to be close to any kind of like brushy cover. Quail are as Andy and the biologist will tell you, are a very brush oriented bird, woody kind of cover. And so what I'm looking for when I'm going to Nebraska, which is, as much or probably more of a pheasant state than a quail state, I'm looking for like those little draws that can't be farmed, that can't be put into production, that have a bunch of sand plum thickets in it, some native prairie, weedy forbs, trees, stuff like that. And so, and the way that I hunt Nebraska is I drive around and I look for those places that pheasant hunters probably don't really want to hunt or, don't think to hunt. And those quail will actually utilize things like CRP fields and cornfields and other crop fields, but they kind of tend to stick fairly close to those draws.
Andy, what is it about the woody cover that attracts quail?
Well, I think Chad's pretty much articulated kind of all the things that we would think of as biologists, and that is really kind of why those quail are going to be around those areas, particularly in the fall to winter months. They're going to stick close to shrubby cover, not necessarily trees. We're talking low growing shrub cover, plums, sand plums, sumac in the southeast, even briar thickets, that sort of thing, where they're going to have the best opportunity to avoid predation. They have overhead cover, but they can still move around underneath those areas of woody shrub cover. I'm going to use it again, Chad. We've been on a recording already, but we would call quail a shrub obligate. They're basically, tied very closely to that shrubby cover, more so even than grassland or tree cover.
When it comes to food specific to, I know it changes throughout the country, but what is a key food source for bobwhites in the Midwest, the South, the East, and then we'll get into other quail species further west. But let's start with bobwhites. What are they mostly feeding on this time of year and throughout the hunting season?
Yeah, this time of year and throughout the hunting season is going to be, of course, different from the summer. But small grains and particularly, fairly small seeds. A lot of times it's a native seed. You might think, they're in the soybeans or they're in the, they're in the sorghum, and they will certainly, use those as a resource if they have them. But small seeds like beggarweed, trefoils, those really small stick tights, we would say, they love those, and they will certainly seek those out if they can find them. And that's what we're going to probably key in on the southeast as much as anything. How about the kind of plain states, Chad? What are they picking on there?
I always look for things like, it's kind of the same thing. This time of year is going to be primarily small seeds and forbs and things like that. I always look for ragweed. I always look for croton or doveweed. Another one that I really key in on a lot, and if I find stands of it that are fairly thick, I always hunt it, is prairie sunflower. Because it also, it has that small seed that quail prefer. It's like, I have quail that have corn in their crops. I have no idea how they get that big old corn kernel down their tiny little beaks, but they do, corn and sorghum. But they seem like, as Andy said, I think they seem to prefer those small native forbs. And whenever I find like a prairie sunflower stand, they have a really small seed, very small sunflower seed. And it also offers them a little bit of vertical cover as well. And so anytime that I see something like that, I'll always hunt it.
When you look at, quail specific to pheasants, like a pheasant hunter, there's certain times of the day when they're going to be out in the field. And there's certain times of the day, when I say the field, they're going to be out in, a picked soybean field or a picked corn field or sunflowers. There's times that you want to target them in the grass, in the roost areas that they're going to be. The golden hour obviously is a special time. When it comes to quail though, when is the best time to target them in those woody areas versus when they're going to be out in the open or out in the grass?
And Andy, you want to take this one? Or?
I would say I would never stray too far. I would never stray over a couple hundred yards from the shrubby cover. Most often, they're not as mobile as pheasants, and pheasant may fly half a mile to go feed or something like that. Quail are going to stick pretty close to home, and they're going to be fairly close to that habitat interface where you've got maybe it's grass cover and shrub cover and crop cover, all those things kind of mixed in together. They're gonna always be within a couple hundred yards of that woody cover.
Yeah, and actually, me hunting this weekend in Nebraska was a perfect example of exactly what Andy's talking about. So early in the mornings, I typically will find quail they will be out in the CRP fields or native prairie fields, but they stay fairly close to those brushy draws. So they'll be out and feeding, and I've taken pictures of my dogs on point on quail and video actually out in the CRP field, and it looks like, well, this is just a CRP field. It looks like pheasant cover, and it is. And those quail will utilize that, but they're never very far from those draws. They won't stray very far. I don't think I've ever found a covey of quail probably more than 200 or 300 yards away from some type of shrubby cover.
Well, that's good advice for people that are potentially going to be in cover that might have both pheasants and quail. I know a lot of pheasant hunters that they have specific times of the year when they head further south to get into quail country. Up here, the further north you go, crops play a big part in the best times of the hunting season to plan trips to go after pheasants. Do crops play into quail plans like they do for pheasants, or when the season opens, it's good or the same throughout opening day all the way through the end?
I think regionally for us in the southeast, no, the crops traditionally are out by the time the season comes in. They're almost always out anyway. And I would say if you're thinking about areas that might be hit a little harder, you want to get in there pretty early, and so it wouldn't depend too much on crop cover or residue, but more so on pressure.
Yeah, same out here. I will find quail around things like a harvested sorghum field, things like that. But what's much more important, I think, to me anyway, in finding quail is the presence of native forbs and cover. If you have the adequate cover and if you have that native food source, I think that's what quail are probably going to key in on more than any certain type of crop.
Gotcha. Well, let's jump right into the report then. Chad, you spent a lot of time putting this together. I don't even know how many hours it takes to cover the entire country and put this forecast together. It is available on quailforever.org. On the landing page, you'll see a link to the 2022 quail hunting forecast. You guys do a great job. Just like the pheasant hunting forecast, you can hover over a state and you really got a good breakdown of what to expect when you go there. Lots of pieces of information. I think hunters looking to plan trips across the country for quail or pheasants, it would do them well to jump on the Pheasants Forever website, jump on the Quail Forever website, and take a look at the information that's provided there. In addition to that, there's a lot of biologists that are working on the ground that are very knowledgeable, and I've not come across any that haven't been willing to offer some information to say, this area had a couple of bad storms, this area had extra dry conditions, whatever it might be for whatever bird. But the information that you guys provide is very valuable, and I trust it. So I tell people all the time to go to your website and then talk to a biologist. Find an area. They're going to send you to good places. Would you guys agree with that? Add anything to that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think, Chad's got the knowledge on kind of the areas that maybe you have to work a little harder here and there. But for the most part, our state partner biologists are really great. And then we have a lot of staff now out on the ground. And I'd absolutely agree, Travis. I think it's a little different than somebody looking for the best deer hunting spot. people that hunt small game are typically pretty sharing with their information. They might not give you an exact drop pin, but
Mm-hmm.
they might say, well, this area of the state or this wildlife management area had good numbers this year, and so go figure it out here. But I think, like you said, even contacting them by email or something, they appreciate that. They kind of like being asked for a resource.
Yeah, and also, the information, the specific local information that they provide is oftentimes the type of sort of like, and I hate to use the popular term, the type of granular information that the forecast can't provide. The forecast is really sort of a macro view, and it really sort of mostly speaks in sort of generalizations and regional generalizations. And quail are such a spotty species in terms of where they're doing well here versus where they're not so doing well there. It's kind of like the old saw about all politics being local. All quail habitat is going to be local, and so even within those regions where generally the forecast is going to either be positive or perhaps negative, there are going to be areas within that region where you can find birds, but you have to access, and probably the best resource for accessing that would be to get on the QF website, find the local QF biologist, and just talk to them, because as Andy said, they're going to be very willing to share that knowledge and to kind of point you in the right direction and give you an idea of how things are in their region.
With that being said, Chad, after putting this together, you've done this for a few years now. What do you think the general outlook is for quail hunters in America this year? What should it be? Is it optimism? Is it, what's the theme? What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, it's hard to really generalize because quail are such a widespread, and of course there's 6 different species, but it's they sort of span the continent, so it's hard to make generalizations about one region versus another one. But overall, I think that it looks a lot like last year, actually. In the southeast, all across, the biggest chunk of the southeast had a fairly mild winter, and in areas where habitat's present, they seem to have had a pretty decent hatch. In my neck of the woods, it's a little bit more complicated. There are some areas of the plain states where they got pretty decent rain, and then there are other areas of the plain states where it's pretty darn dry right now. And so, but overall, I think that it's. I'm always optimistic. I mean, you can't find birds unless you get out and look for them. And so it's like, I would never discourage anyone to not get out and travel and go find birds. So I'm fairly optimistic about the season. You're just going to have to work for them. But then, I mean, that holds true every year. I mean, quail are one of those birds that you really have to kind of do your homework on. And I think that if someone does their homework and goes to a region that has the potential to give them some birds, that they'll do well. So I'm a half glass full kind of guy when it comes to quail. So I guess I would categorize myself as being fairly optimistic about the season.
When you put this forecast together, can you explain kind of what information you're gathering, who's getting it, how they're getting it, and then how it comes into you before you put this forecast together? I mean, because like when we talked about the pheasant forecast, I mean, there's roadside surveys. How do you get your information about quail?
So generally what we do is, and of course I can't do the whole thing by myself, because we've had something like 28 or 29 states this year. So I enlist the help of, sort of a network of freelance writers, but also I very heavily lean on our QF staff. So I will ask some of them to write some of the stories. I will ask, the people in the specific states for their opinion, because their insight, is obviously going to be much more informed than mine is. And so basically what I do is I just give them sort of a template of questions to ask that kind of covers the gamut of, things like, what were weather conditions like, this past year? What were the results of any with roadside surveys or whistle counts or things like that? It's a little bit more complicated on the quail side, because a lot of the roadside surveys and the call counts and things like that come after the forecast is published. So there's a little bit of an air of nebulousness about it because there's a lot of the information isn't in yet, but you can sort of make some broad generalizations about things. And so after that, they go out, they gather that information, and I collate it, and we put it on the website.
It's the calm before the Thanksgiving rush. Now's the time to get all of your Turkey Day essential shopping done at Walton's during their pre-Thanksgiving sale. From their 7 and 11-pound stuffers to the number 12 grinder and 600-pound scale, they are all deeply discounted. The number 22 grinder that John Tremblay and the Walton's team uses in all their videos, yep, it's $100 off. Must-have accessories such as suction cup feet, waterproof thermometers, and hog ring pliers have been marked down too. Take an amazing $100 off Walton's 50-pound mixer and get the heavy shopping out of the way right now before turkey season. If you order now through November 16th, Walton's guarantees that your purchases will arrive before Thanksgiving. So check out the pre-Thanksgiving sale today at waltons.com. The Onyx Hunt app is one of the most valuable hunting tools that I take into the field every day. I use it on every hunt, seriously, every hunt. Their app tells me everything I need to know about the lands that I want to hunt and the lands that we can all legally hunt on. The app also shows your location on planet Earth and clearly lays out the land boundaries. It tells you information about the type of property you're on, like state land or federal lands or walk-in access properties. It's ideal for scouting before the hunt and during a hunt to help put together patterns. The app also has helpful features that show you the kind of crops that are in fields, which obviously is a big deal for us upland bird hunters. And there's a timber cut layer to help you find the right forest habitat for ruffed grouse. If you hunt in North Dakota, there's even a layer that lets you know if a property has been posted electronically. These are just a few of the many tools Onyx apps give you, and these maps can even be used in areas without cell coverage. From the palm of your hand, Onyx maps always help you to know where you stand.
The flush. So fast, it hardly seems real. So vivid, the moment freezes in time before erupting in a blur of spurs and feathers. It's why we changed the way upland loads are built with Prairie Storm. Exclusive flight control FlexWad technology and a mix of copper-plated lead and flight stopper pellets combine to create dense, deadly shot strings through any choke. Longer shots, more power, fewer missed birds. Only from Federal.
So there's a possibility then for hunters, even if they're hearing something that we're about to discuss in your region that you plan on hunting, that it could be better than what we're about to tell you. And I would say for pheasant hunters this year, there are parts of the Midwest that had, decent reports or numbers may have not looked great. And now that hunters are in the field, they're like, I don't know who did the reports. There are birds everywhere here. And I think there was another hatch that didn't appear and they weren't counted. A lot of young birds that are out there. So the optimism, at least from pheasant hunters, has been extraordinary this year. Let's hope that plays in when quail hunters get out in the field. Andy, can we start down in the southeast? I know that's an area that you know a lot about. Let's start in the southeast, work our way west, and then end northwest. Does that work for you guys?
Sure.
Absolutely, man.
All right, Andy, let's take Florida, Georgia, Alabama, some of those states right there.
And ones, yeah, absolutely. And I think Florida's a good one to start on. And we talked with Greg Hagan again, and Florida numbers are pretty good historically compared to other years. They actually kind of are looking at some positives down there. It always goes without saying, basically, that the areas that we're working and doing a whole lot of bobwhite management is going to be your best chances. But particularly some WMAs in the Panhandle, Central and Southwest regions are having good success. Looks like kind of focusing on areas where they've done some management in the last 18 months, which is going to be the same across really any of the bobwhite range, where we've done management, keeping early successional communities, kind of plant communities thriving. So, if there's been a burn, if there's been a timber stand improvement, if there's been some thinning, that sort of thing, we're just getting some sunlight to the ground in the last 3 years. That's going to be best. But looking at, if you're going there, check out the WMA specifics, there's some information actually on our website, my cheat sheet here. You can click on that link for WMAs. It might be an option in Florida. But I would say out of the Southeast, Florida probably looks like one of our better states this year. But we've got some good numbers out of South Carolina as well. And both the Piedmont and down in the PD region in South Carolina, or that coastal plain in South Carolina, look favorable. Michael Hook's our guy there that we always really lean on for information. But we've got people and bodies out, boots on the ground every day working in South Carolina that are seeing, this is a similar number to last year, kind of like Chad alluded to. Not our best, but it's a similar year to 21. So if you had success out there last year in South Carolina, probably look to your old traditional haunts, but kind of that Piedmont. Go ahead.
Are those areas in the Southeast, are they, like you said, it was similar to last year. Do you think that's a stable population, or is it trending up? Is it trending down? What are you seeing as a general quail outlook in the Southeast?
I think, and I'm not trying to be elusive here, but I do think it's kind of very site dependent. So in South Carolina, we're focusing some management on those quail focal areas, and you can kind of look at those under the South Carolina Bobwhite Initiative page. In those areas, we typically are showing a moderate increase each year in the areas that are being managed. Outside of where populations aren't being, or habitats not being managed for quail, you're probably seeing declines. But focusing on those areas of management, and it doesn't have to be a quail focal area, and they actually point that out in South Carolina. There's some kind of areas that if you're familiar with those, say through deer hunting or through turkey hunting, and you see active cutting going on or active forest management, try those for quail. But in all those states in the Southeast, if it's not being, one of the things Chad talked about, moisture in the prairies and in the West being a huge factor for us in the East. We typically don't have problems with too little rain. We have problems with stuff getting overgrown because there's too much rain, and so we're continuously managing to set back that succession for that more shrubby component that we're looking for. But I'd say the same for Georgia, where there's some great opportunities. There's actually still in Georgia, a lot of those wildlife management areas for quail are on the draw system. And there's still some opportunity there for, I looked this morning, actually, you can still apply for some quota hunts. I believe they may be youth related, so youth only, that's still open. And you can get in on those. And that's a chance where you can get a high quality hunt. You'll have a great experience. It's not going to be overrun with hunters. You'll have a chance to move a couple coveys of birds, particularly if you're able to apply and take a kid along. You get a little more opportunity there. So, and you get the kid some great wild quail hunting experience in Georgia. So that's pretty neat. Didn't have a ton of bad weather in Georgia, but similar kind of fall covey counts, were happening in mid-October. So that data is going to be on the Georgia DNR website. We didn't have it for this forecast, but you'll be able to go and look now at their data for fall covey counts. One little interesting one that I saw was Mississippi. Rick Hamrick had a great report for us this year, and actually Mississippi numbers looked a little better than normal. So, if you've got some connections in Mississippi, or maybe have an idea of where to head out there, kind of in the southern portion of the state, saw an average increase of 25% over 21. So, a bird and a half per listening station on their call counts. So that was pretty interesting. I thought kind of a ray of sunshine coming out of Mississippi. They've got a lot of new things going there. New director for the wildlife agency, and kind of some new restored interest in quail. So
when you and I talked before we started recording, you talked about some success stories from Quail Forever that you were excited about. Can you share what those are and where?
Yeah, I can. And gosh, it feels like drinking from a fire hose a little bit around here lately. Travis, there's, in 2013, we put our first people on the ground in the Southeast, in Tennessee. And by the end of this year, we're going to have like 12 people in Tennessee. And we've expanded all the way, from the whole Bob White range. We're going to have over 100 people on the ground, as biologists, as habitat managers out there on the ground working for quail by the end of this year. So that's pretty amazing. But in particular, bright spots would be we're putting what we call habitat teams on the ground, and those are people that are going out and doing burns, doing timber stand improvements, doing active management for quail. We're putting a brand new one on the ground in Georgia. We already have one on the ground in Arkansas. We're about to put one on in Tennessee. We've been hiring precision agriculture specialists who are working with farmers to not only kind of take marginal land out of production, but to convert it to wildlife habitat. We've got a bunch of biologists out there through our Working Lands for Wildlife program. We've put a new state coordinator in Texas, a new state coordinator in Tennessee. We're about to put one in Georgia. It's just it's hard to kind of narrow it down to one bright spot, but for the quail range, even the western quail, brand new state coordinator Scott Poppenberger in Arizona and New Mexico. So just lots and lots of growth. And I'm talking about people here, but people end up creating habitat. Those people on the ground create tons of habitat, both public and private land. And so we're really kind of at the exponential growth curve here for Quail Forever as far as it goes to effect here in the next 2-3 years. It's going to be amazing.
Does that growth, can we celebrate the organization growing then, Quail Forever as a whole, that allows you to hire those biologists and have people working on the ground? Is that because the organization is growing that fast?
It is. I kind of routinely am able to say that we're the fastest growing conservation nonprofit out there, and particularly the Pheasants Forever Incorporated, but particularly the quail side is just seeing a lot of emphasis placed through federal farm programs, a lot of states that are really seeing Pheasants Forever has a great model of success that we're able to lean on. 40 years of getting habitat done in the Midwest, and so we're able to point to that. But now success breeds success. So great relationships in Tennessee and in South Carolina and in Georgia. The states adjacent to those are like, oh, well, we want some of that. We like that idea. I didn't know you could do that. We didn't know Quail Forever could do that as an organization. And once we were able to kind of open the playbook and say, yeah, we're happy to come do that in other states as well. And so we just are filling in the grid. And we put our first people on the ground in Florida this year, and have one person. John Mark has been working in Mississippi for several years, but we're going to have 3 here soon in Mississippi. So just continuing to fill in the dots on the map and the gaps where quail are present. We're trying to work and expand populations that are there, and both public and private land. So
Pheasants Forever, the largest concentration of members, I think, is Minnesota.
That's right.
For Quail Forever, where's your largest concentration of members?
I think traditionally we've kind of had Missouri, Illinois, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma. That's kind of the greatest concentration. We're growing the Southeast concentration as well, and members largely have been dependent on events, and of course our past couple of years have been a little different for in-person meetings, but we're getting back on the train. Actually, been several banquets in the last few days, and one tomorrow night in Nashville for Quail Forever. So we're back in full swing on banquets now. So you'll see an increase on that. We're actually up over our last couple 4 years, I believe. We're kind of back to our 2018 numbers already in both Pheasants and Quail Forever.
Outstanding. So if somebody listening says, I want a Quail Forever chapter in my area, how do they go about starting it?
Man, that's a great question, and I did that for years and years, so I kind of got a knowledge of that. But you go to our website, find your regional representative. They can obviously, if you're interested in starting a pheasant or a quail chapter, an easy way is to, hey, I'll give you my email address. It's aedwards@quailforever.org. We can get you in touch with the right people. So we would love to talk to you. There's not a upfront cost or anything like that. It's just a commitment to get an event going and make a difference locally.
And that's only for if you want to start a chapter. Would Andy give out his personal contact information?
That's
you
right.
Ladies, he's taken. Do not reach out right now. He is a family man. All right, let's jump up. Let's head north. We covered that southeast corner there. Let's head up into your neck of the woods, Andy. Tennessee, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana. And what are you seeing, or what do you anticipate hunters to see this year in that area?
I think, you've kind of heard the theme, but similar to last year, Tennessee is growing. We've got several quail focal areas, but quite a few of those are actually closed due to some research that's going on. And it's looking great. The research is showing some really positive numbers and positive impacts from management, but they're still going to be closed a couple more years. But there's some West Tennessee, it was where I would focus. Middle and West Tennessee is where I would focus, primarily around cropland, looking again for that shrubby cover. I'll go across the river to Missouri and say that there's some areas there. Missouri did a pretty good, they did actually a really good job being detailed in their report for us, and so they lay out several areas, that were going to be bright spots. Best bets. Beth Emmerich has given us some north central and northwestern Missouri. And but then you should look, check out. That's a pretty long explanation and pretty detailed account in Missouri for our quail hunting, and it looks like it starts November 1st. So you're, a day away from that opening in Missouri, but numbers are stable, not significantly higher than last year. But,
I'm looking at the Northwest Prairie region in Missouri, and it says it's up 243% from last year.
That was the bright spot for sure, and I think that's a pretty high number. So an average of 2.18 quail per route compared to 0.64. Last year was a pretty low number, but that's kind of on line with their traditional numbers. So that Northwestern Prairie is a pretty great area if you were going to concentrate on that. But they've got
look at you holding out. You're not giving that big number because that's where you're hunting, isn't it?
No. And Missouri's a pretty awesome deal. They got a really inexpensive license for out-of-staters. So if you're going through there, if you're coming like me, if you're coming from the southeast or the east and you're heading out to the prairie states to maybe go on a dual purpose hunt for pheasant and quail, don't leave Missouri out. Check it out. They've got a lot of really nice areas that they focus on quail management.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I hate to jump in, but that's one of the things that I discovered about Missouri not long after I first started working for QF was I had never hunted Missouri before. And so I went up there on a hunt, and I was impressed by both the numbers of WMAs that they have, the numbers of public hunting areas that they have, and the quality of those public hunting areas. They do a lot of habitat work on them. But the cool thing for me was, like, if you do travel to Missouri to quail hunt, Missouri is actually also a pretty good state to shoot woodcock in if you catch the migration right at the right time. I think that I don't know exactly when their woodcock season ends. It's like November 15th or something like that. But the first time I ever shot woodcock was actually on a quail hunt in Missouri.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Well, I'm looking, Andy, as we that northwest area of Missouri, north central Missouri, obviously southern Iowa, southwest Iowa. I mean, those are areas that I feel like hunters can get excited about this year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That Iowa number, the south, excuse me, that southern tier of Iowa is really looking like, and it says their statewide index is just below the 10-year average, but there's some bright spots in that southern tier. It says top roadside counts in 22 came from Adair, Adams, Fremont, Page, and Ringgold counties. And I think they're breaking it down again really well for us. Southwest is Iowa is kind of considered a stronghold, but it's not. It's actually let's see, 1.69 and 21 to 4.38 quail per route this year. So long-term average is 1.32. So that's looking really good. Basically, based on a mild winter and didn't have any ice storms to kind of really drop the numbers down, which is what we see when you're on that northern extent of the quail range. If you get ice or if you get a long, a blizzard with a ton of deep snow that sticks around for a long time. And so mild winters bring about, better quail numbers in those areas. So looking good. Same thing for South Central. It's above the long-term average, and South Central as well. So, yeah, I think, man, we're talking pheasant and quail a little bit here, and I think that'd be another great state where you could go check it out.
Love it. Before we switch over to Chad in the West, are there any areas in, say, Indiana or Kentucky or Illinois that jump out to you, Andy?
I would say this, the southern half to southern third of Indiana and Illinois would be where you would concentrate. There weren't great numbers out of Indiana or Illinois, but, Kentucky, the western 2/3 of the state is where you're going to typically focus. They've got some great wildlife management areas that are focusing on quail. I always think kind of a Peabody wildlife management area. It's tough, but there are birds there. Chad mentioned earlier those sunflowers, Maximilian sunflowers kind of abound at Peabody, and they hold birds, but it's tough hunting. Clay WMA in northeast Kentucky and Rockcastle River WMA in southeast Kentucky along with Peabody, are where Cody Roden, their wildlife or their small game biologist is recommending for now. But traditionally, Kentucky can be great. There's a lot of small fields and rolling hills, and kind of hunting those fence rows and looking for brushy cover on private land can produce birds.
Got it. Chad, let's jump into a couple of places that I feel like as a Minnesota upland bird hunter, I hear a lot of people that go down to Nebraska and Kansas to hunt for quail. Those are, in my opinion, two places that really get hunted a lot for traveling quail hunter that want to go after them because of the close proximity to the Midwest, upper Midwest, I should say. I have been hearing really mixed reports from terrible drought conditions, no birds, to, wow, there are a lot of quail here this year. And I'm guessing you've been hearing similar?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of get a handle on specifically, for example, Nebraska. So like I said, I was up there this weekend, and I got checked. My license got checked by the county game warden up there on the second morning, and so we're sitting there and we're talking, and he said that in all the people that he had checked opening day, he had only seen 3 quail in the bag, and so he said, yeah, it had been fairly tough for quail. And that may be skewed a bit in the fact that I think that a lot of people out opening weekend are probably focusing on pheasants, but also I think it speaks to kind of the mixed success aspect of the region this year. For example, I hunted I have some spots in sort of south central Nebraska that I have found over the years. It's a mix of WMA and open fields and water sites, and that in years past that I have had pretty good luck finding birds on. And so I I didn't do any pre-scouting this year. I just sort of drove up there blind. And of the spots that I traditionally hunt that first weekend, 4 of them didn't have any cover at all. It's been so dry up there that that they've been grazed or hayed. And so of those 6, 4 of them just didn't have the cover for birds this year, and the other 2 did have cover, but had hunters on it, had pheasant hunters on it, and so I had to kind of freelance a little bit. I had to drive around and try to find some new spots, and in the areas where I found on the areas that had habitat that had enough cover for birds, I found birds. I thought the covey numbers tended to be a little bit, the number of birds in the coveys tended to be a little bit smaller than in years past. And in some areas, I didn't find any birds at all. So it's like, I think it's really dependent on where you go. I talked to one of our board members yesterday who hunted southeast Nebraska and did fairly well. In the eastern part of the state, specifically the southeastern part of the state, got a lot more rain this year than the western and west central and south central parts of the state. And I think that that's probably going to be reflected in the number of birds that people find in those areas. In central Nebraska, I think that it's just going to be very, very much localized in terms of where you find birds. It's going to depend on if they happen to get, on the plains, a lot of times it's like the difference can be one storm, one rainstorm. It's like one area will get just enough rain to instigate some growth and some cover. And 5 miles away in the exact same region, you drive 5 miles and they didn't get anything. And so, flexibility, I think, is really the key when you get out into the plains to find birds. And you can't really, you can make generalizations, but you also have to really, burn some gas and go find birds. And so this year in Nebraska, I think that's probably going to be true. The farther west you go, generally in Nebraska, the drier it's going to. And I think that, but you can find birds there. Some of the open fields and water sites that I hunted had really good cover, and some didn't. So you just have to have the flexibility to just kind of move around and be able to change your plans at a minute's notice.
I love my dog, and like you, I always want to make sure that she has what she needs to stay healthy year-round and perform at her best in the field. That's why I feed Daisy Nutrisource high-performance dog food. Nutrisource dog food comes with their Good for Life system that includes 4 key ingredients that work together to support gut health, heart health, and the overall well-being of our dogs. I have complete confidence that my dog has all of the nutrition to excel in the field and make it through a rigorous hunting season. I've seen it firsthand, and she loves her food. Take it from me and my dog Daisy. Nutrisource high-performance dog food can help your dog reach their full potential. Find the food that's right for your dog at NutrisourcePetFoods.com. Hunting season is here, and North Dakota is one of my favorite places to spend a fall day. That's because North Dakota is a bird hunting paradise. You can hunt both waterfowl and upland birds all in the same day, and North Dakota has approximately 700,000 acres of private land open to public walk-in hunting. This year, North Dakota has a population estimate of 3.4 million breeding ducks, which is 38% above the long-term average. And their prairie pothole region is smack dab in the middle of the Central Flyway. Their spring water index also came way up, over 600% from last year's drought. The habitat on the landscape looks great, and bird reports are strong throughout the state. With a little scouting, you just might find yourself in a field surrounded by wild flushing pheasants, sharp-tailed grouse, and Hungarian partridge. Plan a legendary bird hunt this fall in North Dakota at legendarynd.com. If you're an outdoor lover on the go, then odds are good that you have toys and equipment that you want to haul. Aluma Trailers, well, they've got you covered. Their trailers are built by a hardworking team in Bancroft, Iowa. They have models for nearly any and every hauling need, from ATV and UTV trailers to utility, snowmobile, motorcycle, car trailers, and even fully enclosed trailers like mine. Trust me when I say that Aluma trailers tow like a dream. Their trailers are constructed out of lightweight, strong, corrosion-resistant aluminum, and they are 100% maintenance-free. Plus, they come with an industry-best 5-year warranty. Visit alumaklm.com to find a trailer that fits your needs. Let's move south into Kansas there, Chad. I feel like you're going to be repeating what you just said about Nebraska and Kansas based on just where that drought hammered it, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be actually the same thing for Oklahoma as well. Yeah, in Kansas, so I live fairly close to the Kansas border, so I probably hunt Kansas as much as I do Oklahoma. So Kansas this year is the exact same thing. The farther west you go, the drier it's going to be, the harder it's going to be to find birds, and the more sporadic those populations of birds are going to be. Central Kansas this year is kind of the place to be. Well, central Kansas in the Flint Hills region saw a big increase in the number of birds. But the Smoky Hills region, that whole north central area of Kansas is probably where you're going to want to concentrate your efforts this year. Which, like, for example, like the southwest part of the state, which is where I live or where I'm close to, and I hunt the southwest part of the state quite a bit, they were very dry this year. And it's going to be a lot harder to find birds, and it's going to be a lot harder to find habitat for those birds. A lot of the walk-in areas this year in Kansas, I think, are probably going to reflect the reality of the drought. And so when you find those areas, you just have to get in the truck and go find another one. So but birds are going to be, I mean, there are birds there to be had. So I wouldn't discourage anyone from not going hunting just because of a dismal report in one region.
I
Chad,
feel like
I think you're bringing up a good point there a couple of times, and maybe it's worth reiterating that we talked about this before, but don't be afraid to kind of pop out, try a spot for half an hour to an hour, and if it's not producing, like, head on out and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like, don't waste a bunch of time in a day. Just like you said, it could be because of those rains that they got in May. It could be that it's already been hunted, but just be willing to move around.
Yeah, I think that's the key, really, especially for quail, because just like this past weekend, I mean, if I had gone off, if I had based, the weekend on my initial impression Saturday morning on the spots that I typically and historically hunted, I probably would have just come home, because it was pretty dismal. But I got in the truck and got on X and started looking around for some areas. I had to spend a little bit more or burn a little bit more gas and spend a little bit more time than I had anticipated. But I got out of that area right there and got into some other areas that obviously had either not been grazed as heavily or had gotten a little bit of rain. And that's where I found birds. So yeah, Andy's exactly right. You can't invest too much of your precious time into one area. Be willing to hop in the truck and go.
Oklahoma, hammered by drought.
Oklahoma is a weird kind of state. It's supposed to be, when you look at the report, all indications are that we're going to have a season that was a lot like last year. And the last year was okay. I mean, there were a few birds around. It was not great hunting, but not horrible hunting. And we've been in the part of the state where I live, we've been very dry this year. We got a little bit of rain early, and then we got a long stretch where we didn't get any rain. And we're still kind of in that dry kind of pattern. I think I saw something on one of our Mesonet sites a couple of weeks ago that in my part of the state, we've had something like 30 days without a quarter inch of rain. So we are very dry. On the other hand, just anecdotally, and I have seen probably more broods of quail this year than I did last year. So I'm cautiously optimistic that Oklahoma is going to have an okay quail season. I can't go any better than that.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are going to be quail to be found if you can get out there and look for them. One thing I noticed is that the northeastern part of the state saw an increase in the number of quail. However, that is not typically the traditional quail hunting part of the state. Generally speaking, in Oklahoma, if you want to find quail, especially on public land, you're probably going to have to concentrate west of I-35. That's where the majority of our public land is, our big WMAs where you find quail. And that's where most of the suitable habitat is. We have been the southwest part of the state especially has been very dry this year. So I think numbers are going to be down a little bit down there. Northwest part of the state where I am, I do think that numbers are going to be a little bit negatively affected by the lack of rain that we've had. But on the other hand, the WMAs, the cover on the WMAs is not bad, on some of the WMAs anyway. And so I think that there will be some decent bird numbers on the WMAs if you're willing to walk for them.
Yeah, I'm looking at just the quail by the numbers here for Oklahoma, and I feel like the last couple of years, there's some areas that are right in that area. I mean, some are up, some are down a little bit, but just slightly below the 10-year average that we're hoping for. And
Yeah.
obviously, the amazing thing about quail is how quickly they can rebound. If we all of a sudden get a good moisture year, boom, they just explode.
Yeah. And that's the, I apologize for my dog barking there in the background. And that is the thing about quail, is that if you get one good year, they can absolutely rebound. We've seen that in years past here. I think 2017 was one of those years where we just had really, really good numbers of quail because we had one really good spring for quail production. And then, the next year it can tank. So it's such an oscillation from year to year, and Texas is a good example of that. In Texas this year, it's not looking so great. Probably the place to be for quail hunting this year in Texas is going to be the southern part of Texas. South Texas is, I think, has the best numbers. The Rolling Plains region, which is kind of the stronghold of quail numbers in Texas, is looking really, really pretty poor this year, and it's due to that drought. It's like in Oklahoma, that southwest part of the state is the part that was most affected by drought, and that sort of extended on into Texas. And that Rolling Plains region is adjacent to that, and so you're seeing the effects of that drought in that area. The High Plains region, the Texas Panhandle, same thing. Western Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle, you're looking at pretty dry conditions, and you're looking at a lot less available habitat and cover for birds.
Well, I think that is a good overview of bobwhite quail. As we cross the border into New Mexico and Arizona, Chad, I know you have a passion for some of those desert quail too. What's a scaled quail outlook look like in New Mexico? I've been hearing a lot of optimism that even though bobwhite numbers in that drought area are, not pleasing, the scaled quail might just make up for it.
Well, yeah, it's hard to tell. With the desert quail in New Mexico, in New Mexico, the desert quail and the Montezuma quail are an interesting thing because the Montezuma quail depend on monsoon rains. The desert quail depend on rains as well, but they come at different times of the year. And so, the rains that will benefit the desert quail are not necessarily the rains that will benefit Montezuma quail because they come at different times. And I'm probably oversimplifying that a lot, but in New Mexico, it's the southwest part of the state, I think, has probably gotten the most rainfall. And in that area, I think that Gambel's quail and scaled quail are looking a little bit better. The southeastern part of New Mexico has been pretty dry. And I think that in that area, you're probably going to see lower quail numbers reflected in the reality of that. In terms of Montezuma quail, New Mexico, and they've been, and let me preface this by saying that, New Mexico and Arizona, the entire Southwest really, has been in a prolonged drought over the past few years. And so, numbers are quite a bit lower than long-term averages to begin with. So these numbers are, while they're higher than in years past, they're still lower than where they historically would be. So Montezuma quail numbers in New Mexico, I think, are going to benefit from those beneficial rains that came at the right time. And I think that in Southwest New Mexico, I think that you will see that reflected in their numbers. Southeast and in the eastern part of the state, northeastern New Mexico, where hopefully I was hopefully wanting to do some more hunting in northeastern New Mexico this year, just to kind of see, because I've not hunted that region much. I don't think that this is going to be a great year for that. So it's going to be very, very spotty, I think, in New Mexico and in Arizona as well.
Is there a bird that handles the drought better out of those different quail species?
Boy, now you're getting into a biologist question.
That's okay. If you can pass, you can pass if you want.
Don't go shifting it over here because I don't know either.
I would think, I would think that scaled quail are
Yeah.
probably, scaled and gambled, the desert quail birds could probably handle drought a little bit better than Montezuma quail, because Montezuma quail, from what I'm told by biologists, are so dependent on those monsoon rains for their not only for what they eat, because they're primarily tuber eaters, they're diggers,
Mm-hmm.
and the food sources that they rely on are reliant upon those rains. Whereas I think scale quail and Gambel's quail are maybe a little bit more generalist. And again, I'm probably mangling this. So if I were to guess, I would say that Gambel's and scale quail probably could weather drought a little bit better than Montezuma quail.
Right. I would agree.
Moving on then. Let's head north. Let's go to Utah. Anything in Utah wet your fancy? Is that even a saying, by the way? Did I tickle your fancy? Is that, yeah?
Yeah. Wet your whistle, tickle your fancy.
Wet your whistle, tickle your fancy. There you go.
You made it your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Utah's one of those states, and full disclosure, Utah's a state that I have not hunted yet. And I really want to get out there and hunt it because it's such an interesting state. You don't think of Utah typically as an upland state and as a quail state. But they do have some pretty decent numbers of Gambel's quail and California quail. Well, maybe not California quail, but Gambel's quail for sure.
No, they have California as well.
And do they? Okay. And so, again, kind of the same story. The West is in a prolonged drought, and I think that you're going to find that you will find areas where you'll be able to find some birds, and other areas where you won't. I'm not sure how successful you're going to be in some of those areas that haven't had rain. The Gambel's quail count was a little bit up from last year, so that's encouraging. I think that there's probably some pretty decent options for public land hunters on some of the WMAs there. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag in Utah. And I think that's probably going to be sort of the same song, different verse for a lot of the Western states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking here, there's an insider tip that says look for Gambel's in the brushy washes of western Washington County. So it's a pretty specific area there. But it looks like Gambel's and California both, but then it's not open to scaled in Utah.
Is there a certain part in Idaho or a certain region that generally is kind of like that is where you would want to target for quail in Idaho?
I think that the southwest part of the state is a part of the state where a lot of people key in on, and in that part of the state, winter was fairly mild, and so I think that if you're looking for quail in Idaho, probably the southwest part of the state would be the place to look for it.
Yep. It's been years since I did this, but we did a multi-species hunt up there that was pretty amazing. We flew into Boise, hunted valley quail and pheasant, and then went up into Hell's Canyon, and we got ruffed grouse, blue grouse, huns, and got laughed at by some chuckers. But it was a pretty amazing deal, to get 5 species within just a couple of days, and really just in a couple different areas there. So it's a great state for upland birds.
When people ask me, if there's one place that you would go back to or that I have to see before I'm done hunting, where would it be? I pretty much always say Idaho. The landscape is incredible. The variety of birds, the amount of birds you can come across when you really get into them, it's just absolutely spectacular. I know there's a couple others. Bill Shirk has hunted out in Idaho a couple of times, and he's had his best quail hunting ever out there. It's just a truly special place. And I know that weather obviously can have a big impact, and obviously habitat is number one. But from what I've seen, and I've hunted quail in Oklahoma and, different places that have big time quail numbers, and Idaho ranks up there with them too. And so definitely put Idaho on your list. But I have not hunted in Oregon or Washington. Would I expect similar quail hunting in those two states, guys?
Well, I that's a good question, and it's one that I'm going to find out this year. I'm actually going. I have not hunted Oregon, and so next month I am going out there and hunting with Ben Bredigan from Onyx, and we're going to do a little film on it. And so we're going to see what Oregon mountain quail and valley quail hunting is all about. But I think that Oregon is one of those states. You get to the western states, and for quail hunters, I think you're right. They tend to think of more about the Bob White states or the Southwest states in terms of quail hunting opportunity. But the western states, specifically, Oregon, Washington, California, have some really good opportunities, and Oregon is a pretty good example of that. The west side of Oregon is generally mountain quail territory. The eastern side of Oregon is primarily valley quail. And in Oregon this year, I think according to the forecast, Oregon had a fairly mild winter with not a lot of snowfall, and I think that mountain quail numbers probably responded well to that. And so we're going to find out this December.
Oh, you're going to have a heck of a good time hunting with Ben. I'm going to hunt with him on his trip back across as he comes back towards, because Ben and I live, not joking, 1/4 of a mile from each other.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we have not, we hunted rough grouse in Wisconsin early season, but he's on the road a lot. I'm on the road a lot. And we're going to meet up, I think, in Montana in December on his trip back after he hunts with you out there, Chad. So take it easy on him. I don't want him all tuckered out, but no, you guys are in for one heck of a good hunt. He doesn't mess around. He finds birds or they find him, one or the other, but we always end up.
He's I hunted with him last year in Kansas, doing a similar film on scouting for bobwhites, and his pointer Amos put on a show last year. So, and he's only gotten better. So I'm really happy. I'm excited to see Amos run again.
Yeah. Oh, he's gotten better. That dog is amazing. Let's wrap this up. How about if you guys? I'll ask each of you this question. It'll be our final one. If you had 5 days off or a week to go hunt quail somewhere in America, where are you going to hunt this year and why?
Oh boy, that's a tough one.
Wow.
I'd have to think about that for a second. Andy, do you want to go first? Do you want me to?
I think if you've got some really inexpensive gas to spend,
gas is not an object here.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm paying for this trip. You want best quail?
Yeah,
you want the best quail hunt you can get this year. Where are you going?
I think it comes back to kind of what you're looking for. But I experienced the Southwest hunts last year for the first time, and it'd be hard not to say I want to go back there and try it. But with numbers being what they are, I might head out to Idaho for a mountain quail hunt or Oregon for a multi-species hunt. Because the West, of course, if you're an Easterner, the West holds a lot of mystique for you because it's somewhere different, and we aren't even touching on species like chukar and pheasants, kind of for the most part. So I might head west, but for quail, gosh, it'd be hard not to hit that Missouri-Iowa line, not to go to the Smoky Hills or the Flint Hills in Kansas. So those would be my top quails destinations, I think.
Chad?
Yeah. Now, are you talking if I just had 5 days off and I wanted to go based on the quail report this year, or just my dream hunt?
Well, let's do both.
My dream hunt would be, so one of the states that I've always been kind of intrigued by, because it is, I think, the only state where you can take 4 species of quail, is New Mexico. And it's a bit of an underrated state in that I think it has similar quail hunting to Arizona, but doesn't get quite as much pressure as what Arizona does. And there are areas of that state where you can conceivably, theoretically anyway, take 4 species of quail in a single day or a single trip. And so my dream hunt would be to to do that. It's like I've always wanted to try that. And New Mexico is just a beautiful and photogenic state anyway. So it's a fantastic place to spend time, even if you're not shooting birds. So if I was just doing a dream hunt, I think that I'd try for the New Mexico Slam. That's one of my bucket list. Mm-hmm. If I'm just strictly going off of quail numbers this year, and I wanted to kind of maximize my chances of taking birds, I would probably concentrate on central Kansas to southeast Nebraska. I think it's kind of a little bit of a sleeper region, but I think that they've got good enough quail numbers to make a trip out there.
Love it. I've got New Mexico on my list of places that I've not hunted that I really, really, really want to go and experience, because I've done Arizona a couple of times, and like you guys mentioned, it's a stunning place. But New Mexico, like you said, Chad, is an underrated upland bird hunting destination, and that many quail and that kind of a landscape, that intrigues me. The only thing that doesn't intrigue me about it, snakes. I'm tired of rattlesnakes. I don't want to see another rattlesnake, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. Gentlemen, I appreciate all of your wisdom. I hope it benefits some of our listeners today, that they take advantage of it. They get out there. And if you love hunting for pheasants, you love hunting for grouse, you love hunting for chukar, you'll love hunting for quail too. It's an addictive explosion. There's nothing like a covey rise exploding in front of a dog or in front of you, and they're a delicious bird too. So any parting thoughts, gentlemen?
Andy?
No, Travis, I think that was well said. I think you mentioned it a little bit and alluded to it, but if you're a upland bird hunter at all, you gotta experience quail if you haven't. And for us, I think the experience is about the places and about the people that you meet along the way. And so drag somebody along if they haven't been and they show an interest. Get them out there behind your dog and get them to enjoy it just as much as you do.
Yeah, I would agree. That one of the appeals about quail hunting for me is it gives me the opportunity to go places and to see things and to experience things that I wouldn't really otherwise do. And I don't want to make the pheasant hunters angry at me, but I think that it's a little bit less of a homogenous experience than pheasant hunting, because it's so varied. Because a quail hunt in Oklahoma or Kansas or Nebraska is a totally different animal than a quail hunt in, say, New Mexico or Arizona. And it's a different quail hunt than say Florida or Georgia. And so you have this opportunity to have a vastly different experience while chasing the same bird or same type of bird that I don't know that you get with any other upland game bird. And I think that's probably one of its unique qualities. And I think that's why quail hunters really have a tendency to I think, travel a little bit more than other hunters, is that experiential aspect of putting yourself outside your normal comfort zone.
I 100% agree. Gentlemen, enjoy your hunting season. Thanks again for all the information. You can learn more at quailforever.org. On behalf of Quail Forever, Pheasants Forever, everyone here at The Flush, we thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of The Flush Podcast.